Hello, my name is Kate Shank. I'm the Deputy Director of Legal Aid Chicago. Welcome to our final session of our series, Finding Solutions, Legal Aid for Our Most Vulnerable Populations. Today's session will focus on the unique needs of veterans and how legal aid can help. So now to get us started, I'd like to turn it over to the host of today's session from Sidley Austin, Jamie Jones. Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Kate. It's been Sidley's pleasure to support Legal Aid Chicago and its mission over the last 20 years and to again sponsor this series of webinars highlighting the important legal services your team is bringing to Chicago's most vulnerable populations. Today's focus on your services for veterans syncs with a core focus of Sidley's own pro bono efforts. And of course, finding out what's being done to help this group should be top of mind for all of us as we head into the Independence Day holiday weekend. So I'm excited to hear about the content from the team today, and I will turn it over to Ellen Rayom to take it away.
Hi, welcome. So these are the topics that we're going to cover today. So first, I'll give an overview of the legal issues affecting veterans. Next, we'll focus on two of the most significant of these legal issues, VA monetary benefits and housing. For each, we'll explain the various programs designed to deal with these problems, followed by a discussion of Legal Aid Chicago's work in these areas. We'll address any questions you have at the end of today's presentation. There's a high prevalence of civil legal issues among veterans. A recent survey found that 71% of households with a veteran have experienced a civil legal problem in the past year, and 21% of households with a veteran have experienced 6 or more problems in the past year. I had the opportunity to serve on the Legal Services Corporation's Veterans Task Force, which released its report in May of this year. The report identified the top legal needs of veterans. So the top veteran-specific legal problems are VA claims. So those are Veterans Benefits Administration claims and Veterans Health Administration claims. And the other is records correction, including discharge upgrades and character of discharge determination. And then there are other common legal problems that veterans face in the following areas: consumer and finance, employment, housing, family law, and public health. Today, we'll focus on two of these legal issues: VA benefits claims and housing issues. I'll now turn to the topic of veteran homelessness. Veterans account for 11% of homeless adults in the US, even though veterans account for less than 7% of the US population. And on any given night, almost 40,000 veterans are without shelter in the US. A USC Loyola survey of veterans in the Chicago area found that 19% of post 9/11 veterans and 16% of pre 9/11 veterans reported being recently homeless. And 10% of post 9/11 veterans and 13% of pre 9/11 veterans reported being evicted at least once since leaving the military. You'll hear later the stories of several veterans who struggled with homelessness or the threat of it. A need for legal assistance to prevent eviction or foreclosure is among the top 10 issues affecting homeless veterans, according to a Department of Veterans Affairs survey. And other studies show that veterans who access legal services show greater improvements in housing and mental health. So now I'm going to talk about VA monetary benefits, the first of two major legal issues affecting veterans that we'll explore today. The VA offers an array of benefits to veterans, including monetary compensation, healthcare, rehabilitation, education benefits, burial benefits, home loan guarantees, and life insurance. I'm going to focus on two types of cash benefits that the VA offers veterans. The first is service-connected disability benefits. So that's a monthly benefit that compensates veterans for an injury, disease, or condition that was caused or worsened by their military service. And the other is VA pension, which is a monthly benefit for wartime veterans who are low income, have few assets, or who are totally disabled or over age 65. I'll first discuss VA pension benefits. So there are 3 main requirements to qualify for VA pension. The first is at least 90 days of active duty service, including 1 day in a wartime period. And if a veteran served after 1980, they must have served at least 24 months or their full term of service. Note that there's no need to prove connection between a current disability and military service. It's really just the focus of service during a wartime period. And then the second requirement is meeting at least one of the following criteria that indicate disability. So being age 65 or older, being deemed by the VA as totally and permanently disabled, being a patient in a nursing home, or receiving Social Security disability benefits. And then the last requirement is that the veteran is low income. So that means that, so the rate of VA pension is for a single veteran is $11.60 per month. So that would mean that their income would fall below that. Although there are higher rates for special circumstances if a veteran is housebound or needs aid in attendance or has dependents. And VA pension is a means tested benefit. So that means the maximum amount of pension reduced dollar for dollar by other sources of income and benefits, though there are some exceptions for medical expenses and other necessities. An interesting thing about VA pension is that it provides for survivor benefits. So for surviving spouses and in some cases other relatives can receive it if the veteran passes away. So a moment ago, I mentioned the wartime service requirement for VA pension, that the veteran just has to serve at least one day in a wartime period. So that doesn't mean that the veteran was deployed to a war or conflict, just that they served during that period of time that the country was at war. So these are the wartime periods that were set forth by Congress, and they're different than the declarations of war. They tend to be much broader. So for instance, the Vietnam era is from 1961 to 1975, and the Gulf War era is from 1990 through the present. But it doesn't include every conflict. So if a veteran served in the 1980s and was deployed to a specific conflict, that veteran wouldn't qualify because it's not one of the designated wartime periods. So now I'm going to turn to service-connected benefits, which are the main benefit that our office focuses on in its veteran-specific legal work. So there are 3 requirements to be granted service-connected benefits. And the first is a current diagnosis. So that means the veteran has to be diagnosed with a current disability that the VA recognizes in its rating schedule. And this includes many physical and mental disabilities. And there are different ways to prove this. So traditionally, a veteran would present medical evidence, so the notes and opinions of their treating doctor or another specialist. And but they can also prove it through lay evidence. So if the person has observable symptoms, and in some cases, the VA will accept the veteran's own testimony about their symptoms. The second requirement is that the veteran must have experienced an injury, disease, or condition that arose or worsened during their military service. And this can be shown through military medical records. It can also be shown through statements of someone the veteran served with. And there are other types of evidence that are allowed. So for instance, if there's a news article about an incident that a veteran was involved with, that plus personnel records showing that the veteran was there at that location would be enough to show that in-service event. And then the third requirement is a nexus. So the veteran has to show a link between their injury, disease, or condition in service and their current disability. For mental health conditions, we often get a doctor's note about the triggering events, and that's enough to connect it. A veteran could also show, especially for a physical condition, that they've had the symptoms from the time they served in the military through the present. So they've consistently suffered from a certain condition. A family member or friend might be able to give a statement that connects the two. And then there are a number of circumstances in which the VA presumes this connection. So you might be familiar with the effects of Agent Orange on veterans. And so one of the presumed conditions for Agent Orange exposure is diabetes. So if a veteran served in Vietnam or in the waters right around Vietnam during a certain time period, if they can show that they were there and they can show that they have one of the listed conditions that are associated with Agent Orange exposure, such as diabetes, that would be enough to qualify for benefits. They don't have to prove that a specific exposure caused it. Service-connected benefits are awarded according to our rating scale from 0 to 100%. So this is where it kind of differs from, say, Social Security benefits, which can be all or nothing. You can get, you can be you can have a different level of rating depending on the extent of the disability. And a veteran can be rated for more than one condition, and there's like kind of a complicated way that the VA combines ratings. And so here's a list of the monthly payments for each rating level. These are sort of the base amounts for a veteran alone without any special circumstances, but there are higher rates for if a veteran has dependents or if they need aid in attendance or considered housebound. And what's interesting about these benefits is that they are not restricted by the veteran's income, and that the highest rating level is the amount of benefits is higher than pretty much any other public benefit out there. And so you can see from the rate of 100% that it would have the effect of lifting a veteran and their family out of poverty compared to other public benefit programs. So it can be really satisfying for the veteran to help someone obtain these benefits if warranted. And there's a great need for assistance with service-connected benefits and claims, especially for more recent veterans. So first, there's a large number of veterans, particularly post 9/11 veterans, who qualify for service-connected benefits. According to a US Census Bureau report, post 9/11 veterans had a 43% chance of having a service-connected disability. And so this is a little bit different. So if you look at all veterans, it's a 25% chance overall. So and the Census Bureau tried to account for differences in demographic and social characteristics among the veterans, but there was still a significant increase among more recent veterans. And then also post 9/11 veterans with a service-connected disability have a 39% chance of having a rating of 70% or more. So this is significant because it indicates there's a higher degree of disability among more recent veterans. And we'll hear later on about a post 9/11 veteran who had a number of disabilities from his service and which resulted in a very high VA rating. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the VA application and appeals process. So you may have heard about this being a kind of a never-ending nightmare for veterans where it could take years and years. And these next two slides will show you some diagrams of this process. So this first slide shows a diagram of the old VA claims and appeals process known as the legacy system. So this applies to all claims for which there was an initial rating decision prior to February 19th of 2019. And as you can see, if the veteran loses at that initial stage after their initial application, then it takes 1 to 2 years to get a decision on their first appeal. And if they lose at that stage, they face another 1 to 3 year wait for a decision from the Board of Veterans Appeals. And then from there, they can appeal to the Court of Appeals of Veterans Claims. And then the next slide shows a diagram of the new VA claims and appeals process under the VA Appeals Modernization Act. So this is a relatively new process, and VA practitioners, including our office, are still figuring this out and seeing how it's going to play out with cases. If the veteran's initial claim is denied, the veteran now has 3 avenues or lanes to appeal. So the first is called higher level review. And in that case, the claim goes back to the agency of original jurisdiction, which is usually the veteran's closest regional office. And it's reviewed by a higher level experienced adjudicator. At this stage, the veteran can't present new evidence, and the VA doesn't have a duty to assist. But the advantage is that the veteran or their representative will get an informal conference with the adjudicator and can make the case for why the VA didn't get it right the first time. And if you lose here, the veteran has a year to appeal using the other 2 lanes. The second lane is the supplemental claim lane. And so this is also with the local regional office usually. And basically the adjudicator is looking at all of the evidence again, but at this stage, the veteran can present new and relevant evidence. And the VA does have a duty to assist here. Unfortunately, though, the veteran, while they can request a hearing, they are not entitled to one. And so it's really making the case with kind of some sort of paper submission of documentation and maybe a brief and support. And at this stage, the veteran can appeal. If they lose at this stage, they have a year to appeal on any of the 3 lanes. They can even come back to this lane with additional new evidence. And then the third option is to appeal to the Board of Veterans Appeals. And there the case is before an administrative law judge, and the veteran can choose to have a hearing. And so as you can see, in this new process, some of the timing is the same, and some at the initial stage at least is a bit faster. So the initial claim decision will still take about 5 to 12 months, but then that initial appeals process is much faster. So the veteran is supposed to get a decision within 4 to 5 months. And then the third lane still the next stage, the Board of Veterans Appeals still has a 1 to 3 year wait for a decision. But the veteran can access that lane much sooner in the process. So if a veteran is presenting sort of a new issue or kind of a complicated case, then they can elect to go to an administrative law judge much sooner. And so we're still kind of seeing this play out. So we are seeing the decisions coming down pretty quickly. Unfortunately, in some cases, that sort of meant that the VA isn't looking at the new evidence or is more copying older decisions. So we'll just have to keep an eye on it. But it is nice that there is a faster process and there are more options, but there are some consequences of that if there isn't enough time for the VA staff to make decisions. So now I'm going to talk about some of the challenges that veterans face in trying to get service-connected benefits. So we talked about kind of the last couple of slides about that initial application process. And so nationally, it takes 128 days to get a decision on an application for service-connected benefits. But we see in Chicago, it usually takes a year or more. And then we saw in both of the diagrams that the appeals can take some time. So at the initial stage now, it's taking at least several months. And then at the later stages, it can take several years. Delay. So that's a big challenge for veterans. And we also know that veterans represented by attorneys have a much higher success rate on their claims and appeals, but that attorney-provided legal services are limited. So there are some other options. So one other good option are veteran service organizations. So those are organizations that assist veterans, they connect them to various resources, and they often, as part of that work, do some work on VA claims and appeals. And you might be familiar with some of them. So they include the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, and Disabled American Veterans. And VSOs can be these veteran service organizations can be a great resource for veterans, but the quality varies wildly. They're really helpful on some of the on the process, the basic process of filing, but they can struggle on some of the more complicated claims. And then also one thing to keep an eye out for is that there are a number of unaccredited and people who charge fees to assist with VA benefits claims. They often advertise online now, and it's something to keep an eye out for because often the people working in these organizations haven't been trained, they haven't even been accredited by the VA to work on these cases. And so if you run into a veteran who is working with someone like that, I would encourage you to refer them to legal aid or to a VSO to report the unaccredited representative and hopefully assist the veteran with their claim from there. So now I'm going to talk about what Legal Aid Chicago does to help veterans with VA monetary benefits. So we have a Veterans Rights Project, which I supervise, that consists of 2 staff attorneys, a legal fellow, a paralegal, AmeriCorps Vista volunteer. And we work on initial claims for VA monetary benefits as well as appeals. And it's a little unusual for attorneys to assist with the initial claims because traditionally private attorneys can't collect fees until the appeal stage. But we think it's really important to work at this initial stage because if you refer back to the kind of the chart of the process, it can take years if you're only joining in the case at the appeal stage. And so the goal is to connect veterans with the benefits that they deserve sooner. It's better to get involved at the beginning. And there's also an option called the fully developed claim process where you can submit all of the evidence in support of an application. So instead of relying on the VA to gather some of the evidence, like military records and medical records, the veteran can gather all of that themselves and submit it to the VA and get expedited review. And now I'll talk a little bit about our priorities. So we represent veterans on a wide array of VA benefits, and we advise if we can't take a case, but we do have priorities among the cases that come to us. And so we really look for cases involving PTSD or other mental health issues, cases that involve military sexual trauma, in cases in which the veteran is homeless or is suffering from financial instability. And then we also work on related claims. So there are a number of claims kind of related to this VA benefits work. So the first is the records correction work, so discharge upgrades and character of discharge determinations. And that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation as kind of a top legal issue that is affecting veterans today. So that's really important because many veterans have something called bad paper, which means that due to some sort of infraction or misconduct, they have a status that makes them ineligible to apply for VA monetary benefits and sometimes healthcare as well. And so it's a longer topic. And I would refer you in the meantime to, there's a report that was sent out in advance of this presentation called Underserved that was written by Swords to Plowshares that explores that topic. It's really interesting, and it's something that there's been in recent years, an increase in the incidence of bad paper. And so the VA monetary benefits I've been talking about kind of assume that the veteran is eligible to apply, but there are many veterans who need help just obtaining that initial eligibility. And then we also work on VA overpayments and debts. That's really common and comes up with GI Bill benefits, and then also with the pension program that has its means tested. So it's pretty common for the VA to catch that maybe the person hasn't reported their income, or changes in family status where they were supposed to report certain things and didn't. So we also help with that. And then we also work on Social Security and Department of Human Services benefits, claims, and appeals. And these are also often disability benefits. And so we're kind of working with veterans on a similar issue. So now I'm going to talk about a few of the cases in which our project has assisted with VA service-connected benefits, claims, and appeals. So this first case is Maurice. So he was a Vietnam War veteran, and he experienced some trauma while serving in Vietnam. He was shot at, and he witnessed one of his friends being killed. And he suffers from PTSD. So he served in the 70s, but PTSD wasn't recognized as a condition until the 1980s. And he also has a number of other serious medical issues that are involving his heart, kidneys, and other organs that are related to Agent Orange exposure. But when he came to us, he was ineligible to apply. He was ineligible for VA monetary benefits because of bad paper. And let's see. So we helped him obtain a discharge upgrade from the military board so that he became eligible for VA monetary benefits. So we advocated for the discharge upgrade based on recent Department of Defense memos that allow for more forgiveness for misconduct that can be tied to service-connected PTSD. And we also helped him secure VA service-connected disability benefits at the 100% rate for PTSD and the other conditions. And this had a huge impact on the client. So we met him, he was living on garnished SSI benefits, and his family had a home that was falling apart. And as a result of our work on this case, he's now receiving more than $3,000 a month and received a large back award. So the next case is a veteran who served, a post 9/11 veteran who was injured in several explosions and due to exposure to IEDs and car bombs. And after service began experiencing seizures and PTSD. And he was unable to hold down a job or live his life normally due to these symptoms. So when he had come to us, he had a rating of 70%, but we were able to increase his rating and help him obtain special monthly compensation, which resulted in a significant increase in his monthly benefits and a very large award of back benefits. And we were able to do this by gathering evidence, going through the evidence and connecting certain symptoms to the exposures during service. And the next case is a Navy veteran who served in the 1980s, David. So when he came to us, he was rated at 100% for PTSD and had ratings for other conditions, including special monthly compensation. And he was for being housebound from all these conditions in mind. And when he came to us, the VA had proposed to reduce his rating to 70%, which was going to drop his overall rating to 90%, but also eliminate the special monthly compensation. And so the net effect of that proposal would have been to reduce his benefits by almost 40%. And when we were working with him, we noticed that he had very severe symptoms of PTSD that was resulting in frequent hospitalizations. So we represented him at a hearing and helped preserve his 100% rating and the special monthly compensation. And this was an interesting case, I think a good case to point to where advocacy can matter, because it wasn't just a case of him presenting some of the records, but during the hearing, we were able to point out the VA was using the wrong standard to evaluate his case. They were looking at whether he still met the 100% rate, instead of realizing that because he was already at that highest level, the standard was actually whether he had materially improved. And then also the VA was relying on one of their own doctors who we learned and presented evidence of that he was unqualified to conduct mental health examinations. So he had been, this was something that was noted by the Court of Appeal of Veterans Claims and by the VA Secretary. And that was not something that the kind of made its way down to the regional office where they knew that. And so those arguments, along with the evidence that we collected, was enough to maintain his rating. And then our last case is Reginald. So he's a 1980s Army veteran. He only served several months, but during that time he was sexually assaulted. And as a result, he suffered symptoms of PTSD. And he had applied on his own and was denied. So we got involved with the appeal stage, and we gathered lay evidence and medical records and ultimately helped him obtain service-connected benefits for PTSD at the 70% rate. And this is a really good case of how the VA allows for other types of evidence to support claims, especially in cases of military sexual trauma. So in this case, the client was able to obtain a letter from his mother who he called following the assault. And that, along with the medical records, was enough to for the VA to grant service-connected benefits for him. So that wraps up the first part of today's presentation on VA benefits. So I'll now read the CLE code. It's 360201. That's 360201. And I'll now turn it over to Jackie.
Thanks, Ellen. I have to admit, I'm not excited to go after you after all those great stories. I really enjoyed hearing them. So my name is Jackie Corriath. I'm a supervisory attorney in the Housing Practice Group. So the majority of my work revolves around housing, but I also intersect with veteran clients that come in. So I'm also a member of the Veterans Task Force, and I previously worked at the National Veterans Legal Services Program. Throughout my presentation, I'm going to go over different housing programs, resources, and legal solutions, because I found that they all interconnect when providing holistic legal services to veterans. So the natural place to start when talking about housing and veterans is with the HUD-VASH voucher program. So HUD-VASH is a collaborative program between HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the VA, the Veterans Affairs. And so HUD-VASH combines HUD housing vouchers with VA supportive services to help veterans who are homeless and their families find and sustain permanent housing. So the reason I say it's a good place to start is because among VA homeless continuum of care programs, HUD-VASH enrolls the largest number and largest percentage of veterans who have experienced long-term or repeated homelessness. So to look at 2020, that number was nearly 80,000 formerly homeless veterans were living in their own permanent housing as a result of this partnership between HUD and the VA. So to give an overview of HUD-VASH, I'll start by saying it's not just housing. So HUD provides the rental assistance through the voucher for veterans who are eligible for VA healthcare services and are experiencing homelessness. The VA then provides the case management. So through the case management, the case managers can connect veterans with support services such as healthcare, mental health treatment, substance use counseling, and the entire goal is to help them maintain housing in the community. So the reason that this kind of path to a HUD-VASH voucher is important is because typical subsidy wait lists are very long. And so by kind of creating this separate process where the VA is able to refer veterans to get vouchers, veterans are able to get housed more quickly. So to be eligible for the HUD-VASH program, you have to be a veteran, but you also have to meet the definition of homelessness as defined in the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. So that definition is actually very broad and it encompasses a lot of situations. I think the most common are when someone lacks a fixed, regular nighttime residence, or if they're living in their car or at an abandoned building, or if they're at a shelter. So as long as someone meets those two, they're generally eligible. So to screen for the program, the VA determines the clinical eligibility for the program. The Housing Authority then determines if the veteran participant meets HUD's regulations for the program. So the one kind of strict bar on this is that if you're on the Lifetime Sex Offender Registry, you're generally not eligible. So I next kind of want to talk about SSVF. So that's Supportive Services for Veteran Families. So SSVF was established in 2011 to rapidly rehouse veterans and prevent homelessness due to a housing crisis. So through this program, the VA makes grants to organizations to provide veteran families with assistance and case management to promote housing stability. So you can see on the slide here, there's a number of services that are provided through SSVF. So health, daily living services, financial planning, transportation, legal services, housing. And then we also have listed here the 2021 SSVF providers because it does change based on who applies for the grant. And so you'll see throughout the rest of my presentation, I may mention some of these organizations, and that's because they're helping veterans through SSVF, and then we're working with them to provide legal services. So the first case I want to talk to you about is Andre's case. So Andre applied for a CHA Housing Choice Voucher with the help of his SSVF provider, Heartland Alliance. So after he applied, he quickly learned that his application was denied based on a criminal background issue, which suggested that he was convicted of a felony of arson about 30 years ago. So we got the criminal background report and we looked at it, and he shouldn't have been denied to begin with, but the criminal background report was also incorrect. So he was never convicted or pled guilty to arson. In fact, he pled guilty to a misdemeanor for standing around a lit trash can when he was homeless, when he was just trying to keep warm because he didn't have a place to stay. So we represented him at the informal review in front of the Chicago Housing Authority on this issue, and they reversed their decision. And because of that, Andre was able to lease up in a unit, and he now has his own place. So getting into the details of how the HUD-VASH voucher program works, is for the most part, it's tenant-based assistance. I'm going to get into an exception later, but what that means is that the subsidy that HUD-VASH provides is movable. So the tenant can move around Chicago, and they can also move to another jurisdiction as long as the VA medical center in that jurisdiction has the ability to provide case management services. So the process and how this typically works out is that the housing authority issues the voucher. The tenant finds housing with a landlord who's willing to accept it. All landlords are supposed to accept vouchers. It is considered source of income discrimination if they don't, but we still find people experiencing that still. And so once the landlord accepts it and submits the paperwork, then the housing authority inspects the property to make sure that it's in good quality and that it meets what's called housing quality standards, which is a list of requirements set forth in the federal regulations and also memorialized in the housing authority's rules. So after that happens, the housing authority negotiates rent with the landlord. And the way that the rent works out is, because this is subsidized, is that the veteran pays 30% of the income that they receive. The housing authority then pays the remaining 70%, which is the difference between the rent that was negotiated and the part that the tenant is paying. So I think a good visual representation of how HUD-VASH works is this Venn diagram that we have on the screen. So you'll see on the left, we have the case management by the DA, which is a really important part of this process. So not all subsidies have case management or supportive services like this. And the reason that it's included in HUD-VASH, like I said, is so that veterans can maintain their housing once they receive their subsidy. So it's that case management combined with this other three-part relationship around the voucher. So we have the housing authority, which in the city of Chicago is the Chicago Housing Authority. We have the tenant, and then we have the landlord. And you'll see that all of the people on the right are connected by some written document. Between the tenant and the housing authority, it's the statement of family obligations, so that those are rules that they have to follow as long as they're enrolled in the program. Between the tenant and the landlord, you have the lease, and between the housing authority and the landlord, you have the housing assistance payment contract. So that's a list of rules that the landlord has to follow in order to get paid by the housing authority. So really at any point, and as we're talking about legal issues throughout the rest of my presentation, any of these relationships could break down, and that's kind of where legal aid steps in order to help people. So how does someone get terminated from the HUD-VASH program? So HUD-VASH is also different than a regular subsidy program in that termination from the program is more flexible. And the program was designed that way, again, to preserve veterans' housing. So HUD strongly encourages housing authorities to exercise discretion when deciding to terminate someone, to consider all relevant circumstances, including whether the veteran is a person with disabilities and may need a reasonable accommodation. HUD also encourages housing authorities to consider the role of the case manager and the impact of case management services. And the housing authority also cannot terminate the veteran for a circumstance or activity that occurred before admission that they knew about. So I next want to talk about Jasmine's case. So Jasmine was a veteran that had a HUD-VASH housing choice voucher, and it was administered by the Chicago Housing Authority. So once that rent is negotiated, the tenant's only supposed to pay their 30%. The housing authority is supposed to pay their 70%. But sometimes we see the landlords that want more money. And so that's what happened here. So the landlord was trying to force Jasmine to pay additional amounts over what CHA required. And we call that an illegal side payment. And so when Jasmine couldn't afford that, the landlord tried to evict her. So he issued her an eviction notice and he filed an eviction case for these additional payments that she wasn't supposed to pay, that the landlord wasn't supposed to ask for. And so she ended up in eviction court facing homelessness. So we got involved in the eviction case. We represented her, and we ultimately got the case dismissed and we got it sealed, so that it's not on her public record and people don't know about it, because it obviously wasn't her fault that the landlord went down this path. And she was able to move to a new unit with her family. So in addition to HUD-VASH, I wanted to talk about just general priorities for veterans in housing. So when veterans apply to most subsidized housing wait lists, they do get prioritized based on their veteran status. So for example, the Chicago Housing Authority has had special initiatives in the past to house homeless veterans. They used to have a homeless veterans initiative where they would provide up to 150 vouchers per year to house veterans. All Chicago also has an Ending Veteran Homelessness Initiative community team that focuses on addressing barriers to getting veterans housed through the coordinated entry system. So when I first started talking about HUD-VASH, I said for the most part, this is a movable subsidy that moves with the tenant, but there's an exception. And so we've reached the exception here. So in addition to the movable HUD-VASH vouchers, HUD-VASH can also do project-based vouchers. So project-based vouchers are administered by housing authorities like CHA that already operate the tenant-based voucher program. And so through a project-based voucher, the rental assistance is attached to the unit. So that means that veterans that have a HUD-VASH project-based voucher can't move with their subsidy unless they're able to convert it to a housing choice voucher. So that conversion process can only happen after 1 year in the unit and only if they're in good standing. But similar to the movable subsidy, the veteran will only pay 30% of the income, or the rent will only be 30% of their income. So on this slide here, I have a couple examples of HUD-VASH PVVs. So on the left, we have the 65th Infantry Regiment building. So those are CHA project-based voucher buildings, and there are 48 units there only for veterans, and they're units between 1 to 3 bedrooms. I also have on here Hope Manor. So Hope Manor is kind of a mix of subsidies, but some of them are project-based vouchers. And it's immediate housing for up to 50 veterans who need intensive services, and affordable housing for up to 30 veterans who require less intensive services. And the Hope Manor units are 2 to 3 bedrooms. So what are common issues that veterans with a housing choice voucher or project-based voucher face? We typically see breakdowns in 2 areas. Either a breakdown with the landlord or a breakdown with the housing authority. So for the breakdown with the landlord, we're looking at legal issues around non-payment of rent, maybe a dispute about the utilities, an eviction notice or damage to the unit. For the housing authority, we're more likely to see like the landlord or like a failure to timely recertify problem. So maybe the veteran didn't turn in their annual paperwork regarding their income, or maybe they didn't report their income at all. Also, maybe there's an issue with them being absent from the unit or having unauthorized occupants. So all of the issues that I mentioned are issues that Legal Aid Chicago helps veterans with, and I actually have another example coming up. The next case I'm going to talk about is Terrence's case. So Terrence also had a HUD-VASH housing choice voucher. Unfortunately, at the end of 2020, he was COVID affected and he was hospitalized. He ended up being quite sick. And so during this time, his ex-girlfriend began abusing him and she moved into his unit without his permission, and he was facing eviction for that. So in the meantime, he was just trying to recover and get better from his illness. And he, like I said, he was hospitalized and very sick. So we helped him terminate his lease under the Safe Homes Act. And we also helped him transfer his subsidy under the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act of 2013 by getting him moving papers and terminating his lease without penalty. So now he's in a safe unit and he doesn't have to worry about that. I have another slide here about veteran-specific housing programs. So in addition to HUD-VASH, we have a number of other places where veterans can go. A couple of these are run through SSVF providers. So on the left, we have St. Leo's and Bishop Godert. So these are Catholic Charities developments. So St. Leo's has 141 studio units for veterans. Bishop Godert is not 100% veterans. It's actually funded for people with disabilities and seniors, but it's located in Hines, which is near Hines VA Medical Center. So there's a large veterans population there. On the right, we have some transitional housing programs. So Eddie Beard Veterans House is for male veterans experiencing homelessness. Veterans can stay up to 24 months and receive case management and support services. And the last one I have on here is through Featherfist. That's a transitional housing program. And they provide a safe and secure full-time facility to help veterans transition into permanent housing in 24 months. So I next want to talk about a few resources and grant programs, because like I said, as we're helping people with legal issues, a lot of times these are intersected in finding a solution. So the first one I want to talk about is the VA Grant and Per Diem Program. So this is offered annually by the VA to fund community agencies providing services to homeless veterans. So programs that receive this have to have supportive housing or service centers. And the service centers have to offer case management, education, crisis intervention, or counseling. And that's how they're eligible for the funding. So right now in Cook County, we have a number of grantees, and you'll see that I've organized them here based on the VA Medical Center that they are paired with. The Intervoice, Featherfist, VOA, Boulevard of Chicago, the Family and Friends Day Center, Midwest Shelter for Homeless Veterans, and Housing Forward. You'll see some people that are also receiving funding through the SSVF. And so those agencies are providing a lot of support to veterans. So I also wanted to talk about two other resources for veterans. So the first is the Chicago Community Resource and Referral Center. So this is a center for veterans that are homeless or at risk of homelessness, with community-based multi-agency services to promote permanent housing, health and mental health care, career development, and access to VA and non-VA benefits. The second one is the Veterans Assistance Commission of Cook County. It provides social services and emergency financial services to veterans in Cook County. The financial assistance is available for transportation, rent, utilities such as electricity, gas or water, food, and burial or cremation. So just to circle back to some of those issues we were talking about earlier, how does Legal Aid Chicago help veterans with housing? So we defend terminations from the HUD-VASH program. So I talked about the Andre's case earlier with the eligibility issue. We defend against unlawful evictions. So I was talking earlier about Jasmine's case and how she ended up in eviction court, even though it wasn't her fault. We assist veterans in getting reasonable accommodations in housing. And I actually have an example of that one next that we'll go through. And then we assist veterans in securing safe housing under the Safe Homes Act. So this is just an overview of what we do, but if there's a veteran with a housing program or a legal housing program, we try to assist in any way that we can. So the last case I want to talk to you about is Frank's case. So Frank is a person with, is a veteran with disabilities, and he had a housing choice voucher through the Chicago Housing Authority. So Frank had very limited mobility. So in order to walk, he had to use a walker most of the time. And then when he was at home, he had difficulty even walking throughout his unit. So he would use kind of like a rolling desk chair to get around. Just because of his limited mobility and his disabilities. So his landlord issued him an eviction notice because he was using the rolling chair in the apartment. And she was worried that it could damage the floors and she wanted him to leave. So we spoke with him about it, and we got the landlord to rescind the eviction notice. And then Frank ultimately decided he wanted to move. So we got him the time that he needed as a reasonable accommodation so that he could move and that no eviction was filed and that he didn't have a penalty for using these devices in his unit. So as a result of that, like I said, the eviction notice was rescinded. And then Frank was ultimately able to stay within the same community, just at a new unit that he felt good at. And he's now in a new apartment without an eviction on his record. So I think that is the last slide for me. So I am going to turn it back to Ellen to give a little bit of an overview about how veterans can connect with us to get help.
Hi, yes. So there are a few different ways that veterans can reach us. So one is through the Illinois Armed Forces Legal Aid Network. So that organization is a network of 19 law school clinics and legal aid organizations across the state, which helps active duty service members and veterans in Illinois with civil legal issues. And the network has a statewide hotline that offers advice and makes referrals to the member and affiliate organizations. So if a veteran calls that line, they'll speak within a few minutes to an attorney who can advise them on a number of issues and will try to place any case that needs additional work or is kind of a longer case where they need an attorney to represent them with one of the member organizations. And we're one of the member organizations. And within that network, we are one of 3 organizations that does VA benefits work. The others are law school clinics. So at SIU and UIC John Marshall. And so veterans can call that hotline. If they have a case that falls within our priorities, it will be sent to us. Veterans can also contact our hotline at 312-347-8340. And veterans can also show up in person or right now remotely at our clinics. So we have a clinic at the Jesse Brown VA Medical Center. Right now it's remote still because of the hospital location, and that's on the first Thursday of every month. And then we also have a clinic at the VA's Community Resource and Referral Center on the third Thursday of every month. And that's now back up in person. So a veteran can just show up there and speak to an attorney from our team. So that, Jackie pointed out that in an earlier slide, the VA Community Resource and Referral Center is also a place where a veteran might go for housing resources and other related resources anyway. So it's a great place for us to meet with veterans who have a number of legal needs. And then we also get cases through partner organizations that work with veterans in the Chicago area. So those include Vet Centers, Heartland Alliance, Thresholds, the Illinois Department of Veterans Affairs, the Road Home Program at Rush University Medical Center, and the UIC John Marshall Law School Veterans Legal Clinic.
Great, thank you so much, Ellen. I'm going to take a minute just to talk for a few minutes about volunteer opportunities. But I just wanted to say that, Legal Aid Chicago's commitment to assisting veterans with their legal needs is truly something that spans the entire agency. And I've seen firsthand how our experts work across subject matters to serve this population. So thank you and Jackie for your incredible work. I know many of you may be wondering how you can get involved to help us serve those who have served us. At Legal Aid Chicago, we have over 20 different pro bono opportunities spanning subject matters and offering everything from a short-term commitment of a couple of hours to a longer-term engagement. And we do have opportunities for attorneys and non-attorneys. Ellen and Jackie highlighted the diverse legal needs of our veteran clients, and we have several ways to help. In particular, we actually have 2 cases available now. So if you're really feeling moved, one to help the veteran resolve a debt with the VA through no fault of his own and overpayment, and one to help with getting service-connected benefits, which Ellen spoke about that process. If you want to help with either of those cases, we'll provide you co-counsel and sample documents to walk you through it. We also have opportunities to help with other legal issues that veterans face, including evictions and criminal records issues. And so if you're really looking for an opportunity to make a concrete impact today, you can. And over the past 8 weeks, I have highlighted a handful of opportunities to volunteer with us, and I hope you feel inspired to get involved in helping our clients. You can find more information about all of our volunteer opportunities on our website, and you're welcome to reach out to me with any questions that you may have about any of our opportunities and how you might be able to help. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Kate Schenk.
Thank you, Melissa, and thanks to you, Jackie and Ellen, for sharing your work with us. That concludes the planned content portion of today's presentation. In a moment, we'll start the Q&A portion. But before we do, just a quick reminder, We would appreciate it if you could please fill out a brief survey about the presentation. And to do that, or if you'd like CLE credit, just click on the link in the chat and fill out the form. Note that the certificates of attendance will be sent out within the next week of attending. So we just want to thank all of you for joining us in this series and have made it such an incredible success, and such appreciation to our team who has put this together and have shown their expertise in all the areas that we've discussed over the course of this presentation. So today's panelists are going to remain on to answer your questions, which you should type into the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. And I know we have some questions that have come in, and just ask that Melissa, could you please take us through those questions?
Thank you, Kate. It's my pleasure. And we've got some great questions already. So Ellen, there's a question here about a particular situation and sort of a question of whether or not this is something that is common or legal. So a Vietnam War era veteran, upon being granted a medical discharge, was forced to sign a document that waived all future veterans' benefits. Have you seen or heard about this? And what, if any, effect would such a document have?
I have not seen this particular situation. And in fact, usually when someone has a medical discharge, that would actually maybe tend to help their claim for service-connected benefits. And so we'd want to see those records and help the person use that to apply. I would probably encourage the person to reach out for assistance, but to definitely try to apply, because it seems a little odd that they'd have to waive that unless they were getting some other great compensation.
Thank you, Ellen. And there's a couple more questions here, particularly for you. And so you went over the process for appealing. And so one question is, is this, we are going to send out the slides for this particular presentation after the presentation. But one question is, where can someone go to learn the process for appeals that you went over?
Well, I would say the PowerPoint that we'll send out that has a copy of it. That's probably the best way. It is kind of in bits and pieces on the VA's website. I haven't seen a diagram of it, but also if the person, if you are a veteran or you're working with a veteran who's applying, that next stage will be outlined in correspondence. So if a person's denied at any stage, the decision letter will have all of the next steps in the appeal process.
Great. And a couple more questions on the benefits. So are veterans who prevail on an appeal entitled to back benefits during the period while the appeal was pending? And then there's a question about whether interim benefits are available pending appeal.
Yes. So if a person was denied initially, then approved on appeal, then they would usually get benefits back to the date of their initial application. Now, there's always a chance the VA would say that the person's rating wasn't at a certain level until a certain point in the appeals process if the medical evidence shows that. But that's always something we address when we're filing a brief in support of a claim, where we'll specifically address the effective date and try to get the earliest effective date. And then so on appeal, so if the VA tries to reduce someone's rating, then they're successful in appeal, can they keep the back benefits? That depends on the timing of the appeal. So I think if you refer back in the PowerPoint slides later to the appeals process, a person usually has about a year or two pages. But if the VA proposes to reduce, in the letter will say this, they have to file the appeal and request a hearing to continue the benefits within 30 days of that notice in order to continue the benefits during the course of the appeal. So that's, well, the deadlines tend to be pretty generous, that it's not in that case. And so that's why we really strongly encourage a veteran, if they want assistance in their claim, to reach out as soon as they get a notice. That way we can make sure that a deadline like that is met so that they don't lose benefits during the appeal.
And another related question there, Alan, is there interest paid if someone gets retroactive benefits? Do they get interest, considering that the appeal process can take years?
Yeah, unfortunately, no. And it's pretty it's unfortunate, but that's not the case. You don't get interest. And we do see some very large back awards in our cases because the VA can take an incredibly long time. it's kind of insane that someone could end up with more than $200,000 in back benefits, but we've seen that happen in a number of cases because of the length of time the VA takes to get it right.
Yeah, and Ellen, we have engaged volunteers who have who have knowledge of financial planning and how a veteran can deal with that large financial award and sort of what to do with it. So that's another way we engage people who have expertise to be able to assist veterans, and we are very grateful for that collaboration. Jackie, a question for you. You mentioned the coordinated entry system. Can you explain what that is?
Sorry. I realized that I was on mute as I went to answer your question, Melissa. So the coordinated entry system is a kind of central intake system for people that are homeless or kind of at risk of homelessness to be placed in housing. And so it's kind of this big long list. People have to register to get on it. And then you're prioritized based on a variety of factors. So when you're screened to get put on the coordinated entry system, they will ask you a number of questions kind of about different parts of your life, different parts of your experience of homelessness. And then they'll put you on the list and hopefully you rise to the top, and then you'll get referral for housing. And sometimes it can be different types of housing because of kind of the nature of the list. It's usually subsidized, but it's meant to match people with their housing need. And it's probably far more complicated than I explained, but that's it in a nutshell.
Thanks, Jackie. Ellen, you mentioned this, and I think it also might be helpful for people to understand the housing contents as well. So if you're dishonorably discharged, are you eligible for any benefits in particular, any of the housing benefits that you mentioned, Jackie?
So for the monetary benefits, you wouldn't be eligible, but that's where it would come in to do some records correction, like a discharge upgrade, and you'd want to reach out to, or on your own, but like ideally reach out to an attorney to help you with a discharge upgrade so that you become eligible for benefits.
And that is not a bar for receiving like a HUD-VASH voucher or anything like that. Really, there is that only one limited bar about the sex registry. So a discharge problem is not going to be a problem for housing usually.
We've got a related question here, which is, can VA benefits ever be in jeopardy because of substance abuse?
So it depends. So it's more of an issue usually when the person's initially applying. So the VA needs to sort out, they'll try to parse out like so where this kind of comes into play a lot is with commonly with mental health claims. So say a person has certain symptoms from the service-connected mental health condition, but then they also might overuse alcohol. And so the VA needs to sort out which symptoms are due to the mental health condition and which symptoms are due to the alcoholism. And so we would normally try to present evidence on that front, usually in the form of a support letter from the person's treating mental health provider. But what's nice is that the VA does have a favorable rule for veterans. So if the VA can't sort it out, like some of the symptoms overlap, then they're supposed to give the veteran the benefit of the doubt and award them the benefits. So, but it's not a case where the benefits would be taken away for that type of substance use. And in fact, I mean, it's a little bit controversial, but we do use that, I think now, understanding that substance use disorders are mental health issues related. And so we will often present that as evidence of the mental health claim.
And Jackie, you talked a little bit about supported housing in some of those veterans housing situations. Is there some expectation that people are in treatment in some of those programs?
For some of the transitional housing programs, there is treatment involved often, but I mean, the programs are meant to be flexible. And so we don't, I mean, it's kind of similar to what Ellen said, like with the flexible standards, we don't see a ton of issues regarding substance abuse in terms of it terminating someone's assistance or being a problem with their participation. But I mean, again, if people are seeing those, you are welcome to refer them.
Great. Thank you so much. Ellen, you mentioned sort of when you were talking about appeals that people are far more likely to be successful with an attorney. So do you have any data on how often people are successful pursuing an appeal with an attorney, in particular with Legal Aid Chicago's assistance?
I don't have the data with me right now, but I think you can imagine how having an advocate would make a big difference in the sense that a person who applies on their own the VA might get it right, recognize some service connection and give a person a rating. But if the condition's pretty obvious, but even in those cases, with advocacy, you can address other things and get more. So oftentimes, like I said earlier, we'll address the effective date, make sure that the VA is giving benefits back to the correct date. We've seen recently the VA will try to just do it much closer to the decision rather than looking at when the application was initially filed. We'll argue for a very specific rating based on the medical record, so we don't just let the VA decide. We'll present a case for a very specific level. And we'll also look for things like secondary conditions that might not be directly related to service, but were caused by a service-connected condition. So I don't have the data handy, but there are studies on this.
Great, thank you so much. And relatedly, do veterans usually seek medical and psychological treatment from VA hospitals, or do they seek it elsewhere? And does legal aid help with eligibility and other issues related to treatment at VA health centers?
Yes, so it's pretty common for veterans to get mental health treatment at VA hospitals, but they don't have to go there. There are also other kind of VA facilities called vet centers, which offer counseling services. They're supposed to be focused more on rehabilitation, but they have a special kind of expertise in some of the mental health issues and military sexual trauma issues. And then there are other organizations that work with veterans, that non-VA organizations that give mental health treatment to veterans. So in Chicago, there's Thresholds. And then there's a program at Rush Hospital called the Road Home Program that focuses specifically on PTSD and traumatic brain injury. And some of these programs are really great for different reasons. So first of all, some veterans don't like associating themselves as a veteran or don't like the VA. And then in certain cases, it's less so right now, but sometimes the VA treating providers feel like there's a conflict of interest in providing supporting letters and things like that for VA claims because they work for the VA, even though they work for the health administration, not the benefits administration. So it can be helpful to work with an outside organization so long as that other organization kind of has some expertise in helping people with veteran specific issues. And then we do also help with help people become eligible. So we would do that through a character of discharge determination. So it's similar to a discharge upgrade, but it sort of changes the veteran's status before the VA. And that can help them become eligible for VA healthcare and VA monetary benefits. And those are really important cases.
Great. And Ellen, one of the things that often comes up when serving the veteran population is that they may be difficult to reach, or that, they're not likely to reach us through traditional sources that other clients may. And so can you talk a little bit about the outreach efforts that your team in particular conducts to make sure that we can reach those veterans?
Yeah, so we work a lot. We spend a significant portion of our time on outreach. And so probably one of the biggest things we do is working directly with other organizations that serve veterans. So social service organizations that connect veterans to housing and other services. And so we work a lot with social workers and try to get referrals for cases. And even once we have a case, we might work through, if the veteran prefers, through their social worker, if that is easier. So that's really important. We also go to events like stand down. So there are these events that are held several times a year for homeless veterans or veterans at risk for homelessness. And so we'll go there. We'll often have a legal clinic at that event. And then we also have our regular legal clinics. So where we catch a lot of walk-ins of veterans who are coming to different facilities for other services. And we are hoping that they stop by and we can screen them for legal assistance, just to make it a little bit easier, because it does take, if someone has a lot of challenges in their life, it is difficult to call another hotline and wait to be connected with someone. It's much better if we can be in the community, make that sort of initial point of contact very easy for someone.
Great, and that sort of leads to the final questions, which is about I think it's important to emphasize how someone can get connected to services through Illinois AFLAN, and the question in particular is about those who might be seeking assistance with family law issues, including domestic violence and or custody. And so can you repeat the Illinois AFLAN number and our hotline number so that people can connect with us?
Yes, so our hotline number is 342-347-8340. And the AFLAN hotline, let me just pull that up, is 855. 1 second. Sorry, I'm having trouble loading that slide.
Too many screens. We definitely know it was included in the previous slide.
Yeah, it's on the slide. I know it starts with 855. I think it's 452-3526, 453-3526. And so that is a great resource to be connected to for any sort of civil legal aid issue. It's a great initial point of contact because it cuts down on a veteran having to call all different organizations for assistance with different issues. A person can call with like 5 issues and get advice on the ones that where advice is going to be enough, and be referred and connected with organizations to help on anything that needs additional work.
Great, thank you so much, Ellen. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Kate Shank to close it up.
Thank you again, Melissa, and to Jackie and Ellen too. And thank you to everyone for joining us. You've really made this series such a success, and we're so grateful that you spent your time with us today and for previous series sessions. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thanks again.